Good afternoon, everyone. Caresoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Cloudflare webinar, Protecting Your Public Websites with Cloudflare WAF. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today, Matthew Bachnovitz, Senior Strategic Solutions Engineer at Cloudflare, and our moderator, Keisha Himes, Senior Strategic Solutions Engineer at Cloudflare. Matthew, I'll pass it on to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Matthew Bachnovitz. You can call me Bach. There are way too many Matthews in the tech world these days, and so I decided to kind of appropriate an old high school nickname, and therefore pretty easy to remember Bach. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you, Keisha, for answering questions in the background. I super appreciate it. Our topic today is really protecting your public website with Cloudflare WAF. We'll go over a few different things around this. The first of all, we'll talk about what Cloudflare is. So where are we running this WAF? The second thing we'll talk about is kind of the basics of the controls we can put in place. So the managed rules, custom rules, attack scores, things like that. The third thing we'll talk about is, okay, now that those rules ran, how do we know what happened? So we'll take a look at the analytics and events. And at the end of this deck, there's a bunch of links you can go through and click through to the developer documentation. If you have any further questions, want some in-depth stuff, there's a lot of good information there that'll be included with this deck that's going to be sent out. So the first thing we'll talk about is what is Cloudflare? So Cloudflare is locations in all these different cities across the world. There is about 405 terabits per second worth of network capacity. Why that number matters is because Cloudflare runs our own hardware and we run our own fiber. We are not dependent on the hyperscalers to do this stuff. In addition to that, we have an Anycast network, which means we can provide services from a single IP address in multiple locations. And therefore, we can spread all this stuff out. So there's a DDoS attack, and for example, that's spread over China and Africa and South America. The POPs in those locations respond to it, and therefore we can distribute this network capacity across that DDoS attack. So in general, all our services run everywhere on our network. In a lot of other providers' cases, you will see that, for example, their SASE product will run out of 20% of their stuff, or their other product will run out of 50% of their stuff. We run virtually everything everywhere with obvious limited exceptions. We also play in a couple different spaces, right? Today, we're going to stick to the top right corner in the application services and just one line within that specific bucket. There are plenty of other things we do for application services. So application services being, we're going to protect your website from the outside world. The other things we do include zero trust, which means I'm going to connect and protect your end users, your employees. So whether they're trying to access stuff on the internet or try to access internal resources. The third piece here is the network services. So this means, okay, let's protect that incoming IP address to your network, or let's connect various locations you have using Cloudflare as that backbone. And the last part we do, which has a really a lot of prioritization right now, is the Cloudflare developer platform. And this is where a lot of our AI stuff comes in. This is where our serverless use case really comes in. So go write the code, run the worker near where the end user is, and then because of that, we have lower latency and higher performance. Plus, you're not dealing with any containers, you're not dealing with VMs. You're telling the platform what you want it to do, not how to do it. Also, that's where a lot of our AI inference running kind of exists at the Cloudflare Edge platform. So the first thing we'll really get in depth into is, okay, what's a WAF? Well, a WAF specifically, traditional firewalls are at layers 3 and 4, IP, TCP, stuff like that. A WAF is really looking at that full HTTP transaction. So it's looking at the request header, the request body, the response header, and the response body. So anything within that HTTP transaction is really what we care about from a WAF specific perspective. And like I kind of mentioned before, the WAF lives within just one little slice of all the things we can do in terms of application security. So The end users are going to connect to Cloudflare, and Cloudflare will connect back to wherever your website origin lives. Within that, we terminate the TLS connection, and therefore we see the entire clear text transaction. And that's how we really get through to doing all these services at such a high level. So let's talk about the controls that we're really going to dive into here. The first is our managed rules. Our managed rules are more of our static rule sets. We're using regex. Looking for specific headers. We're trying to do very specific things with signatures. That's managed rule sets. There's two different managed rule sets we'll talk about in a little bit. They are automatically maintained by Cloudflare. The second thing is custom rules. So a custom rule is pretty much whatever you can think of to apply something security wise. I want to geo block. I want to block this specific user agent. I want to pick a criteria about that request and response process, and then I'm going to apply rules to it. And the third thing is attack scores. And now these tie into the custom rules, but what they really are dynamic machine learning scores. So instead of relying on static things, we're going to do defense in depth and say, here's the static rules we're definitely going to do and address. But in addition to that, we're going to use machine learning to determine, are these requests malicious or not, in a couple different ways. And we use custom rules to say, hey, if this attack score is less than 20, let's go block that. So those are the three key protections we'll talk about today. Before we get into the depth of what those protections are, let's talk about the different actions we can take because they have a couple different functions. The first is block. Block is pretty simple. You're going to get a 403. It's exactly what it sounds like. Logging. I'm going to log it. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to take any action on it. I'm going to let it go through. The challenges. The challenges are where we get a little more interesting. The challenges are really meant to address automated versus non-automated traffic. It's really to go bot or not. And when you have false positives, the nice thing about this is they are able to exonerate, right? They're able to click that button and get through the challenge and go, oh, you were human after all. Just kidding. Here's the content you were looking for. There's two key types of challenges here, the JS challenge and the interactive challenge. The JS challenge is I'm going to have the browser run some JavaScript, generate some data, send it back to me, and I'm going to be able to go, oh, that was a bot, that was not a bot, and let them go. It's non-interactive. It is just browser run some stuff. The second one is the interactive challenge. The interactive challenge is the one you'll see most often with the little checkbox, the Cloudflare by it. This is exactly what you think it is, just generating some data, some signals to come back to us, determine bot or not, whether that's okay, and then moving forward. The managed challenge is what we usually recommend people implement when they are doing these kinds of bot or not decisions. They are really, it's determining automatically by the system whether the JS challenge or the interactive challenge is more appropriate. So it's a little more flexible. And the last piece is skip. So there are certain specific security controls you can define to skip if you want to, whether that's, hey, don't run any of these managed rule sets for the rest of this request, or don't do XYZ. That's where that skip functionality comes in. This is where we're going to pivot to kind of what the managed rule sets are. The first managed rule set is the Cloudflare managed rule set. So these are examples of the Cloudflare managed rule set. These are developed and deployed by Cloudflare. There is no need to update these. We take care of that, right? Cloudflare will deploy those. When you have 0 days come in, like the latest SharePoint vulnerability, this is where those controls were really deployed, to be able to deploy those to the Cloudflare managed rule set. Each rule, as you see, has an action you can select and whether to enable that or not. Pretty straightforward stuff. We do have plenty of rules that by default are disabled. These are there for in case you have a specific scenario where it makes sense to enable them, but we feel that they generate too many false positives as they stand to deploy to the world. The next one is the OWASP core rule set. The OWASP core rule set is maintained by OWASP, and we just happen to deploy that within our engine. They use more of a score-based system for their rule set. And so the goal for them is to go, okay, some rules have really high scores like 100 or 1,000, and some have really small scores like 5. The goal is that you set a threshold, and then one small thing maybe not doesn't trigger a block, but a bunch of small things might cumulatively trigger a block. So the first part here is we're assigning the sensitivity of the scoring, right? What is the score threshold that it needs to meet to take an action? Second piece is the paranoia level. How many different rules should I be running, right? I love the term paranoia level. I just think it's a fun thing to say over and over and over again. But the higher the paranoia level, so if I go to 2 or 3 or 4, the more rules I'm going to run and the more false positives I'm going to have. And the last part of this is the OWASP action. So when I actually hit that score threshold, what am I going to do about it? When I put this in initially, does it make sense to maybe leave this in logging for a week, take a look at the logs and make sure there's no obvious false positives, things like that? Or do I want to block it? Or do I want to challenge it? It all depends on what my objective is for deploying these rule sets. Here's an example here. You can see that the individual rules have their individual paranoia level tags. So you can tell which rules will be deployed and not deployed based on the paranoia level. In addition, we don't allow you to change the action score. The reason for that is because these are really calculated and balanced to work a certain way. And if you change those scores, it kind of breaks a bunch of stuff. But you are able to enable or disable individual rules aside from the exceptions. Speaking of exceptions, when you find a false positive, whether you need exception to the OWASP rule set or the Cloudflare rule set, the process is really the same. What you're going to do is you're going to take this managed rules here, create rule managed rules after these have been deployed, and it's going to give you what this screen looks like on the right-hand side. Now, the goal here is to narrowly define your exceptions. So when you're looking at your logs, and we'll get into that in a little bit, when you're looking at your logs, define what are the criteria that I can narrow down this exception to. Maybe it's a specific path. Maybe there's a specific user agent that is doing a specific thing that's triggering a rule. Maybe you need an exception for a specific set of IP addresses or an ASN. You're going to define that in that when incoming requests match area. So you're going to do it as narrow and as granularly as you can, right? The next thing is going to be then selecting which rules you want to skip. You can select all remaining rules, so I don't want to look at anything, or you can select the specific rule from the specific rule set you care about. This is the best way to do things as a best practice. So you can be super granular about creating these exceptions. The next thing we'll talk about is the WAF attack scores. So the WAF attack scores are machine learning generated. So we see about 20% of the world's internet sites. That's a massive amount of traffic. The advantage of that is we can use all that for threat intelligence data. With that threat intelligence data, we can drive data into these machine learning models and continually make them more intelligent and adaptable. We have 4 different WAF attack scores. The first one is the most generic. It's just saying, do I think this is an attack? That's the WAF attack score. The other ones are more specific to specific types of attack. So there's a score for SQL injection, a score for cross-site scripting, and a score for remote command injection. These tend to be more accurate for the things they're doing because they're tailored to those specific types of attacks. Within the Cloudflare system, there is scoring for all these different types of attack scores, including bot scores. There's other scores that exist within the system, but we generally use a 1 to 99 system. Within this, 1 indicates more malicious and 99 indicates likely clean. Because these are machine learning scores, there's a bit of variability to them. There is a bit of adaptation to them, and therefore they may have different levels of confidence. Therefore, you can have a number anywhere between 1 and 99 to indicate where that needs to live. As a very best practice, we typically say start out by blocking WAF attack score with a number of 20 or less. And then what you do over time is you're able to adapt your settings here to your environment and your risk tolerance. If I'm super concerned about false positives, maybe I put the WAF attack score at 10 or less. Maybe I'm super paranoid about my site, then I'm going to put it a little bit higher at 30 or 45 or something like that. Maybe I have a legacy application that I know has an old database in the back end. Maybe I'm going to put SQL injection for that specific host name. So there's a lot of things you can do with these scores to really ratchet down that protection. And when we talk about WAF attack scores, and then in combination with the managed rule sets, you're really talking about defense in depth. And that's the big piece that all these things should be applied, not just a few of them. The next thing we'll talk about is the custom rules. So the custom rules are I find I want to block a specific user agent. I want to use the WAF attack scores. I want to challenge this path that maybe a payment path is on, right? Maybe I want to challenge every single user on it. You're going to define custom rules to do those things. It looks kind of like this. What you'll see at the top left is the field and operator and value. So you're going to set your criteria. What are the things that are going to trigger this rule? What you'll also see is the expression preview. This is the actual code that's going to run to select that code. If you find that this interface is not good enough in terms of depth and detail of what you're trying to accomplish, you can edit that expression directly to modify that selector. So you can get all crazy with ands and ors and different brackets and however you want to do it. You're able to go edit that expression if you need to. And then once you've defined what you want to act on, then you're going to define how you want to act. And that's where these actions come into place right here. In this case, we're just saying if there's a WAF attack score less than 30, we're going to go block that traffic. So next, let's talk about security analytics and events. So the thing we want to talk about is security analytics are really about the bigger picture. We're talking about all my traffic. What does that look like from a general perspective? When we talk about the security events, we're talking about what specific event triggered one of the rules that I've set up. So the analytics are the holistic picture. The events are the individual specific logs that have triggered security events. Within this, we are able to show analytics and events at both the account level, so all the different things you have done, all the zones that you have, or drill into it and do it for specific zones or pieces of traffic. As an enterprise customer with Cloudflare, you get 30 days worth of these analytics and logs. So I'm going to quick pivot over to this little demo here and show you what this looks like. So where I am right now is I am at the account level. I'm going to see a bunch of what are effectively DNS zones. And if I go under Security Center and I hit Security Analytics, I'm going to see all the different analytics across all my different zones and all my different traffic. The first thing I'm going to pay attention to is this right here. This is going to show me how far back in data I am going. So in this case, let's say I go back 21 days. It's going to adjust all these screens. I can take any of these graphs and do something like this, and it's going to set that counter, and it's going to zoom in on that kind of data. So let's reset that. What I can also do up here is for all these analytics and events dashboards, I hover over different things and I can start filtering based off them. So if I decide to filter based off this, it adds to a filter here, and now the entire data set becomes filtered down on that piece. All the analytics, all the insights, all of it is adjusted to that. When I look at traffic analysis, here's my total number of hits. Here are mitigated by Cloudflare means we blocked it. Served by Cloudflare means I didn't have to go to the origin. Cloudflare already knew the answer. Sometimes that's a redirect. Sometimes it's serving from cache, whatever the case may be. And then serve from origin means I had to go back to the origin to get the response to this question. We were talking about attack scores. That's where you're going to see right here various attack scores. And I can kind of filter based off this. Hey, I only want to see the good ones up to here. All the data will then kind of reset based off that. And I can see all the individual scores here for any given piece of data that I have. The sampled logs between the analytics and the events are slightly different because they're different data sets. Sampled logs are the bigger picture and they include everything. So they don't have as much super in-depth security detail as the event logs. So in this case, you're going to see your attack scores, you're going to see some general information, what did the origin response code was, what the origin response code was, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of account level logs. When we go into security events, now we're going to see a slightly different view. The same kind of criteria really falls into this, and you can still filter based off things. You can look through stuff. You can highlight different time frames, see what they are. But the logs at the very bottom will be a bit different. They'll be a bit different because they're going to have things like, where to go? why it why it blocked what it blocked. So this was a schema validation error. Here's, for example, if I come into here, I'm going to see, okay, what rule set was I looking at and what rule triggered. So I can go in depth and figuring out, oh, this specific log was a false positive. I can go filter off this and I can create an exception based off that. So that in general is kind of the analytics and events. And if you go into any individual zone like this, you can go into security and the analytics, and now you're just into the specific zones logs. The nice thing about this view in a specific zone is that if I, for example, find, oh, this is a bad IP, I really want to block it, I filter here. And all I have to do is I see that source IP there. I can create a custom rule based off that alone. And you'll see on the right-hand side, it's going to give you a rule preview and then create that rule in that custom rule interface. So I can go and deploy this rule all with a couple clicks of the button after I find out what I want to take action on. And that at a high level is the WAF and the analytics part of it. So at this point, I will open it up to questions. Anyone have any questions on anything I talked about so far?
Hi, Matthew. This is Keisha. Just letting you know there was a question I received around the managed rule set and what type of visibility does the Cloudflare customers have if a new rule or is updated on the rule set or is zero-day vulnerability is addressed in the rule set.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a change log of all the changes we make to not only our application security products, but a few other different products. So when we make changes to the platform, when we do things, we try to put it all in here to do this. If you select application security, you will see that, for example, we released 2 days ago a WAF emergency release for a Cisco ASA RCE vulnerability. This is where you'll be able to find if new things are added, if what they're doing, specifically like what the previous action was and what the new action is. Sometimes things will be deployed in logging mode, sometimes things will be deployed in blocking mode. It'll have the full rule ID here for you to go reference and just check your logs. But you'll see kind of we tend to release rules once a week, twice a week, something like that. And you're going to see all the different things we're doing to deploy to that WAF. Any other
Great.
questions?
Yeah, I know we have a few minutes left, so I just have two more questions. One of the questions is regarding when you make a change in the custom rules or you deploy a custom rule or make a change in the managed rules, how long does that take for that change to effectuate? Do I need to require downtime or wait till it's midnight on a weekend to do that? Can you talk to the change management of the WAF and any of the custom rules?
Yeah, absolutely. So the general rule that I would put out would be that uh, most changes are deployed in seconds to like a minute globally. That is just kind of the way the Cloudflare infrastructure works, is that this will be deployed very, very quickly. There will be no downtime. There is no taking your service offline to apply these things. These rules are deployed dynamically and globally in a very quick amount of time. So you will see results in your analytics within a handful of minutes, a small handful of minutes typically.
Great. And the last question I have is regarding the automated traffic, particularly with regards to AI crawlers and web scrapers. Where in the WAF does Cloudflare give customers visibility on the AI scrapers and web crawlers that are accessing the public resources?
Yeah, another good question. So what Cloudflare's done is we've really decided to give visibility to all our customers around AI scrapers and crawlers. We think it's important data. We think the world is changing, and this is a very valuable piece of information. So for all of your zones, when you're in a kind of a zone view here, at the top, you will see an AI crawl control. And in this case, you will see the various types of crawlers that exist here, right? And you'll see kind of the number of requests, what they're doing. You're able to define your robots.txt. So your robots.txt file is going to define to bots what you think is appropriate behavior for using your site. And then what we'll do is we'll compare what you said in your robots.txt file to if it's been violated or not. In addition, what you're going to have is these are dimmed out for me, but they won't be for you. They're allow and block each individual type of crawler. Now, it's important to understand that these are self-defined crawlers. These are crawlers that are like, yep, I'm Google, I'm this, and I'm being forthright about my user agent, my IP addresses, stuff like that. There are AI scrapers that aren't going to follow this set of rules. Though that's really where bot management comes into play as a solution to deal with things that don't want to be defined, that try to skirt kind of the rules of the road. So there's different ways you can approach that with rate limiting, with bot management, things like that. But for a lot of the really big ones, they're going to be listed here, and you're going to be able to individually choose whether you allow or block those to have content.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Matthew and Keisha. I want to thank all of our participants as well as our speakers for being with us today. We hope our webinar has been helpful for you and your organization. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us.